Lately, I've been thinking about harmony, not just musical harmony, human harmony. I think music may explain something important about people. My grandson Caleb recently played in a middle school concert band performance, and while I was sitting there listening, something hit me. Young musicians don't walk into a room already knowing how to create harmony together. They learn it, they practice it, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes badly, sometimes painfully. They miss notes, they rush, they overpower, they get distracted listening only to themselves. But over time, something changes. They slowly learn to hear beyond their own instrument. And I couldn't stop thinking, maybe that's true for us too. Because people in general don't naturally begin in perfect harmony either. We all come in carrying different experiences, different fears, different personalities, different emotional rhythms, different volumes. And when life gets loud, most of us instinctively focus on our own part, our own frustration, our own hurt, our own opinion, our own need to be heard. But creating harmony requires something more. Awareness, listening, adjustment, practice, and maybe that's part of what growth actually is. Not becoming identical, not silencing ourselves, but learning how to hear beyond ourselves while still playing our own unique part. Most of us want harmony, but wanting harmony and practicing it aren't necessarily the same thing. Truth check. One of the things I kept thinking about during that concert is the difference between hearing and listening. Because we hear people all the time. We hear opinions, we hear complaints, we hear political arguments, we hear stress, we hear noise. But listening takes effort. In music, a player can't just blast their own part as loudly as possible and call it harmony. They have to pay attention to timing, balance, tone, pacing. They have to notice when they're overpowering the ensemble, and they have to adjust. That doesn't mean their part doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. The music isn't the same without all the parts, but harmony only happens when people become aware that they are one part of something larger than themselves. And honestly, I think human beings struggle with that. I know I do, especially when emotions get involved. When we feel misunderstood, we push harder. When we feel ignored, we get louder. When we feel hurt, we stop listening. And suddenly, everybody is playing noisily over each other. Not because everyone is evil, not because nobody cares, but because focusing only on our own part feels safer and easier. The problem is, an entire ensemble can't function that way. Neither can families, communities, relationships, or countries. Hearing happens automatically. Listening is intentional. It takes effort and often isn't the easiest thing to do. And I think a lot of the tension we're living inside right now comes from the fact that many of us are hearing each other constantly without truly listening very often. Sometimes growth begins the moment we realize being heard isn't the same thing as understanding. And understanding usually requires listening longer than feels comfortable. Truth check. Here's the part I really love about young ensembles. No one expects them to sound perfect immediately. We understand instinctively that harmony is something they grow into. And that matters because it changes how we interpret mistakes. When a middle school band struggles, we don't usually scream, well, obviously music is hopeless. We understand they're learning. They're developing awareness, timing, discipline, emotional regulation, trust. That process can sound messy for a while, but that messiness isn't failure. It's part of growth. I think human relationships work the same way. Sometimes we expect ourselves or other people to already know how to navigate disagreement perfectly, to already know how to communicate well, to already know how to regulate emotions, to already know how to balance individuality with community. But a lot of us were never taught those skills clearly. And even when we do learn them, we still mess up. Because harmony isn't a destination you permanently arrive at. It's an ongoing process. Every new person changes the sound. Every life experience changes the sound. Every loss changes the sound. Every generation changes the sound. An ensemble is always adjusting, always recalibrating, always listening again. That doesn't mean harmony is impossible. It means harmony is alive. That gives me hope, because if harmony were something people either magically had or didn't have, we'd be stuck. But if harmony is a skill, a practice, a process of awareness and adjustment, then growth is always possible. Hard to admit, right? Me too. Sometimes we expect instant harmony from human beings who are still learning how to listen. Truth check. There was another moment from Caleb's concert that stayed with me. His band teacher, Mr. Couch, talked about wanting every student to learn to play taps. Just 24 notes, simple, quiet, intentional. And he talked about wanting students to be able to participate in taps across America on Memorial Day. That hit me deeply, because sometimes patriotism doesn't look loud. Sometimes it looks like a teacher in a small Wisconsin town helping young people remember something bigger than themselves, helping them pause, helping them listen, helping them understand that freedom wasn't free. And what stuck with me was this: those students weren't just learning notes. They were learning shared memory, shared responsibility, shared awareness. Music was becoming a form of connection. I think that's part of what healthy societies need. Not forced sameness, not performative unity, but shared moments that remind us we belong to something larger than our individual frustration. Because when people stop seeing themselves as connected to one another, harmony starts collapsing into noise. And again, this isn't just political, this is human. Politics reflects human behavior. Sometimes the best parts of it, sometimes the worst. But underneath all of that, we're still human beings trying to figure out how to live together. And maybe one of the reasons music moves us so deeply is because it quietly models what healthy coexistence actually looks like. Different parts, different strengths, different sounds, still creating something together. Maybe harmony isn't something we start with. Maybe it's something we slowly grow into as we learn to hear beyond ourselves. Truth check. And here's one more thing I don't want us to miss. An ensemble is never frozen. People join, people leave, skill levels change, energy changes, life changes, which means harmony is never finished. It has to keep being practiced. I think that's true for societies. Every generation enters the room carrying different experiences, different fears, different assumptions, different kinds of wounds. And every generation changes the sound a little. That can feel uncomfortable sometimes, especially when things feel unfamiliar. But unfamiliar doesn't automatically mean broken. Sometimes it simply means the ensemble is adjusting. The important question is whether we are still willing to listen, still willing to recalibrate, still willing to listen long enough to find balance again. Because harmony does not require every instrument to sound identical. In fact, the beauty comes from the differences. A violin doesn't sound like a cello. A trumpet doesn't sound like a clarinet. And thank goodness for that. They each play a different part. They each bring something unique to the ensemble. The goal isn't sameness. The goal is learning how very different sounds can still coexist in a way that creates something meaningful. And maybe that's part of maturity, not demanding that everyone sound like us, but becoming skilled enough to stay connected even when the sound around us changes. Sometimes we confuse harmony with sameness, but real harmony usually requires difference. Truth check. So through my window today, I don't think harmony is something human beings automatically start with. I think it's something we slowly grow into through listening, through awareness, through adjustment, through practice, sometimes through failure too. Young ensembles remind us of something important. Messiness doesn't mean growth isn't happening. It often means people are still learning how to hear beyond themselves. And maybe that's true for us too, because the ensemble is always changing. New people enter, new experiences enter, new tensions enter, which means harmony isn't something we achieve once and keep forever. It's ongoing work. But I still believe it's possible, not because human beings are perfect, but because we are capable of growth. And every time we pause long enough to truly listen, we move a little closer. When have you experienced a moment when someone truly listened to you, or where you realized you needed to listen differently yourself? And what do you think helps human beings move closer to harmony instead of just louder noise? I'll be reading. This week, notice one conversation where your instinct is to immediately focus on your own response. Then pause and intentionally listen a little longer before speaking. Not to silence yourself, but just to practice hearing beyond your own part for a moment. This channel isn't about censoring or forcing people to agree. It's about slowing down long enough to really listen, understand different perspectives, and approach discussions with thoughtful reflection together. I welcome different views, I really do, but respect matters here. If you disagree, explain why. If you see it differently, share your perspective. Here, our differences are strengths, and they're starting points for deeper understanding, not weapons. And if you'd like a little extra help shaping your reply, I've linked my 3 Ps in Action comment edition in the description. It's the same process I use myself to pause, pinpoint truth, and proceed with purposeful forethought. Harmony isn't the absence of difference. Maybe it's what becomes possible when people learn to hear beyond themselves. If you find these reflections valuable, hitting the thumbs up, sharing this with a friend, or subscribing helps bring more people into the conversation. And I'm really glad you are here. Remember, pause, pinpoint truth, proceed with purposeful forethought. Join the conversation. See you next time.